All right, we are live, fellas. Apologies for the technical difficulties off the top. The link should be working. This is our site subscriber only live stream. So today, what we're going to be doing is breaking down your guys' start sit questions in depth while we have some time on our hands on our Thursday, Monday, and Sunday live streams. There's so many people in here that it's really hard for us to keep track, and we don't want to force people to, super chat anytime they want a question answered. So for those of you guys that are site subscribers, we will get to your questions. No questions asked. And then also, too, we're going to break down kind of some news updates, injury updates, things that we know now that it's Saturday afternoon. We have all the practice reports and that kind of thing that we didn't have on Thursday when we first went through your guys' questions. So we'll quickly go through that off the top of the show each week, and then we will get to all of your start sit questions after that. So I'm going to share a thread here from Deepak on Twitter, Sports MD Analysis. He does great work. He's very on top of things. So basically, we have a couple players who are confirmed out, I believe now. Christian Watson, it says lean towards sitting. I believe he has now since been ruled out. We know that Cooper Kupp is going to be ruled out as well. So those guys are going to be without in your lineup. We had some scares on Thursday when in regards to Kenneth Walker and Ramondre Stevenson and some of those guys. It seems as though those guys are going to be fine. I'm not sure if you've seen anything different, Danny, but those are the major injury news items that we kind of heard throughout the week.
Yeah, so the things I've heard for the record with Kenneth Walker, like he says, leans towards playing. I did hear apparently he did return to practice. Pete Carroll's basically already said, like, yeah, this guy should be playing ready to go for week 1. So that's obviously going to be at hand here. With Christian Watson, we already know he's ruled out. Terry McLaurin, he should play through that turf toe injury, like Deepak says, and there should be low concern, but it is a turf toe. It could always flare up at any point. So we just got to be wary of that when, we're projecting forward for the week.
Yeah, I think Kenneth Walker didn't actually carry an injury designation going into the injury report for Friday, so it looks like he should be just fine. Marquise Brown and Darren Waller both popped up with hamstring injuries as well, which I'm sure, especially for Darren Waller, people are concerned because, I mean, hamstring injuries have basically caused him his season, the last 2 seasons. And he's older now. He's, not the type of guy that we want getting a week 1 injury before any of the games have been played. And this was always the concern with Darren Waller, which is why that, me and you were never willing to go all in on the Darren Waller projection. We were like, he has a high ceiling. He's a good projection. Tight end 7 to 8 or whatever is where we feel comfortable taking him in that 6th, 7th round area. But people were in my home league, he went in the mid 4th round. And I'm sure a lot of people's home leagues, Darren Waller hype train got really out of control.
In my home league, he went at the 401 as the 3rd tight end off the board. So the Kool-Aid was absolutely drinking at that point. People were projecting the role. People and for what it's worth, I understand why you would project the role. You see availability to be the number 1 weapon on his team for an ascending offense, from the ascending quarterback with a good coach. I understand all the peripherals, not to mention when Darren Waller is fully healthy. He's a freaking nature. But at the end of the day, this guy hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. He's an older tight end. And what made us think that going into the season that he wouldn't deal with some hammies, he wouldn't deal with some, calf strains, he wouldn't deal with these lower body things that we typically see from older wide receivers / tight ends?
Yeah, absolutely. The other big one that we are very concerned for from an injury perspective are these ACL bros, Javonte Williams and Breece Hall.
Yep.
I've seen Deepak say this, the data suggests, 60% of his workload, 85% of his efficiency, which means you're looking at about 50% of pre-injury production, which would probably knock Javonte Williams out of starting, consideration. If you guys have better options, he's definitely somebody that I think is more of a low-end, mid-end RB3 than somebody that you just need to start because you spent a 5th or a 6th round pick on the guy. And same goes for Breece Hall. I would imagine about the same pre-injury production is what we're looking for there, 50% or so, and maybe even worse given the fact that it's a bad matchup against Buffalo and Dalvin Cook will probably eat in more than Samaje Perine eats into Javonte Williams. I broke that down in the running back rankings tier list, which actually went live on the channel a couple minutes ago. So those are the major injury updates. Of course, this segment will probably be longer the more we get into the season because, injuries are a part of fantasy football. And of course, we're going to have to break those down every single week. So now that we're kind of past that, we can get into your questions and we'll go basically as long as you guys want us to go. If you have a bunch of questions, we'll definitely get to them. Beanie Weenie says, we are back. What's going on? Everybody had some trouble with the link on the site initially, but it looks like we are good to go. Zach says it's been working fine for me. Standard league we got from Beanie Weenie here. He needs a pivot for Darren Waller. For what it's worth, it sounds like Darren Waller is going to play. So I wouldn't be too concerned about him not playing. What I would be concerned about is like him re-aggravating it and like it lasting the whole season. But it does sound like he's going to play this week. But he does ask Gerald Everett, Jawan Johnson, Luke Musgrave, Jake Ferguson, Irv Smith are some available options in my league. Do we wait on Waller or start someone in an early game?
See, that's the thing. What I would honestly do here, okay, so straight up out of those guys, I would prefer Luke Musgrave. However, knowing inherently that Jake Ferguson plays in that same game as Darren Waller, I may as well just wait until the Sunday night, see if Darren Waller's playing. If he's not playing, you go and you pick up Jake Ferguson, who could still have a relatively good role with that Cowboys team. Apparently, it's expected to be a little bit rainy type of weather, not the best weather forecast outlook for that Sunday night game. You could expect, a lot of intermediate action from that Cowboys offense. And I do think Jake Ferguson, given that the fact that Luke Schoonmaker throughout the preseason was kind of dealing with some lower body injuries, never got fully in tune with that offense. I think at least for week one, we could see a full tight end one type of role for Jake Ferguson. And that could be, 6, 7, 8 targets from Dak Prescott in that offense.
Yeah. The thing with Darren Waller is, like he's playing on Sunday night, so you're not going to know. And on Monday, there's not really any pivot options that you can go to. Dalton Kincaid's probably rostered. You don't really want to start Tyler Conklin or something like that. So I would say, I think you'll know by Sunday afternoon. So maybe that leans me towards Everett just because he's playing at 4 and not at 1 o'clock. And I actually prefer Everett of this group anyway. So I would maybe pick up Everett and stash him at the end of your bench. And if you don't know if, Darren Waller is going to play by, 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, then you can go with Gerald Everett instead. That's probably the direction I would go. But I will say it looks like he's trending towards playing. They said it's not serious, but I also wouldn't be shocked if midway through the second quarter, Darren Waller's in the medical tent being looked at for a hamstring re-aggravation or something like that.
So for full transparency, if I had like my choice of these guys, it would be so Luke Musgrave, I have ranked 12, but obviously he's playing I believe he plays at 425. So I'd actually, if you're gonna do that direction and you're gonna know by the afternoon, I would prefer Musgrave over Everett. And I'd be willing to do a little side bet action with that.
Yeah, we could do Musgrave over Everett. I knowing that Watson's out definitely, upgrades, Musgrave, but I will say, like, I just want access to the 51 over under of the Chargers Dolphins game. I know it's, there's a lot of targets to go around, but Mike Williams is a tough matchup. It's possible that Gerald Everett gets into the end zone, something like that, especially with tight ends, man. Like, you usually can't count on a high target share anyway. So high game totals are something that I tend to lean towards, especially at the tight end position when you're talking about guys that are like fringe starters.
Yep, absolutely. So, we see 3 of you in the chat thus far. If you guys have your start sit questions, feel free to just keep spamming them. Like at the end of the day, this is why you guys come to these live streams. You guys get these questions off early, and it's much better to ask when it's a crowd of 3 right now, or potentially how high it gets, rather than, when it's 250, 300, 350 plus on those Sunday morning live streams.
Yeah, absolutely. So fire away your start sit questions at the top. For the meantime, we can talk about some of our start sit decisions. I'm looking at a situation in the Get Faded Dynasty League where I'm competing now after I made a number of trades this offseason. I'm going to be looking at starting potentially with Brandon Ayuk or with Alexander Mattison. Now, I lean towards Brandon Ayuk. It is a full PPR league, but I will say the game environment of San Fran and Pittsburgh is not something that I'm really excited about. It's supposed to be a low over under. Sharps are betting the under right now. But then again, Alexander Mattison, guaranteed workload, high over under point total game against the Buccaneers. Vikings are favored by a number of points too. So good game script for the running back. It's definitely an interesting decision for me. And I am, for what it's worth, a texture for this team. I already am starting George Kittle too. So it maybe factors into that decision a little bit. Where are you leaning in that decision?
So the way I kind of look at it is, depending on your matchup, like, do you think that you need like that big time ceiling, or do you kind of just need your, that player to play their role?
I think this is a team. Let me just check really quick. I think that the guy I'm going up against, he's more of like a rebuilder, so I am quite favored in this matchup. So it probably doesn't honestly matter that much, but I think I'm going to go with Madison. Just give me the guaranteed touches. If I'm a dog or if I'm a favorite, I tend to lean towards the guys with guaranteed touches at running back. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why if you're an underdog, you may as well go for the upside shot that Brandon Ayuk has, 6 catches, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. But when you're in that type of position, there's no need to take the risk, right? Okay, I got a couple for flex: Dalvin, Mooney, Downs, and QJ. Now, the one thing I have to ask you, Jared, is A, is this a full PPR or half PPR? Because the running back is going to be favored anyways. But B, It's probably just Dalvin anyways, but given the fact that we don't know what Darnell Mooney's offensive output in terms of volume is going to look like, we don't know what Josh Downs' week 1 role is going to be. We figure he's going to be the slot wide receiver, but at the end of the day, I mean, we just saw it happen with Jahmyr Gibbs on Thursday Night Football. We could hear all we want to hear in the preseason until I actually see that rookie taking that full starting role. I'm going to tread lightly. And same thing with Quentin Johnson. Like, I want to make the case, like, hey, week 1, like, obviously he's a much more talented player than Josh Palmer. He's going to play ahead of Josh Palmer, but I expect at least by week 3 we're going to see that. But weeks 1 and 2, like, coaching staffs are just fucking dumb, man. Like, we've kind of learned to realizing that at this point. Coaching staffs will play like older veteran players just to kind of appease the locker room, at least for week 1, week 2. Hence, like, literally what we just saw with Jahmyr Gibbs. When asked after the game, we heard, yeah, no, we eased Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, we want to see if he can handle it. And it's like, he clearly could handle it. He had 60 yards and 9 touches. Just give him the ball more.
Yeah, that's generally how it goes with rookies, man.
Yeah.
If you're starting rookies in your starting lineup this week, you got to understand that they're probably not going to play massive snap shares right away. And if they do, you might have something pretty special. Like if Jordan Addison goes out there and runs 95% of the Vikings routes and has like 9 targets in week 1, like we could be looking at something pretty crazy for him. And that's kind of like what the signal was for Chris Olave, right? Like last year, Chris Olave and Jahan Dotson, those guys scored. Dotson scored like 2 touchdowns in his first game or something like that. And you kind of knew right from the jump that he was probably going to be a player in the NFL. I actually disagree with you on this decision, though. I think he does specify that it's full PPR.
Oh, it's full PPR.
I lean Darnell Mooney even in a half PPR, to be honest.
Wow,
because
half?
because the Bears are at home, they're favored. I think Dalvin and Breece are going to cannibalize each other to the point that you're probably not going to be satisfied starting either player. So I think I lean with Darnell Mooney as a high target share guy. Jair Alexander isn't expected to shadow DJ Moore, but if he ends up doing so, then Darnell Mooney might be maybe has a little bit of a open looks and that kind of thing. I also think too, with Darnell Mooney, you're getting the upside that like this, I think this Bears offense could really surprise people. Like, you know how week 1, there's like a big surprise every single year. Yeah. And I think the Bears offense might be that surprise, just given what we saw from them in the preseason with Herbert and, DJ Moore running those big touchdowns. I could see, a coming out party right from jump with the Chicago Bears offense at home against their division rival.
We could do another side bet if you'd like.
Yeah, we could do it. I'll take Darnell Mooney. Yep. I'll take it even in half. I think in full, I absolutely go Mooney there, but I'd take it even in half.
In full, like I would probably take Mooney, but in a half, like give me Dalvin. And I hate Dalvin. But
yeah, we're vast Dalvin haters. So Beanie Weenie asks also Breece, Godwin, London, 1 flex, 1 wide receiver. It is a standard league. He says he has Calvin Ridley, Pollard, ETN as his other starters. So in a standard league, generally you favor running backs, but these are too good of options to go with Breece Hall, in my opinion. Chris Godwin and Drake London, while they're not in great offenses as far as like pass volume and that kind of thing, I will say they're better options than Breece. If you have the option to not start Breece Hall this week, I would definitely take it.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I'm trying to find if I have any start sit decisions, by the way, to share. So, I mean, I guess the one I do have is, of course, Christian Watson's already rolled out in this lineup. Odell Beckham did return to practice, I believe, yesterday.
He did. Apparently, ankle injuries are not like too finicky, too. I mean, Deepak touched on it in his thread. He's like, ankle injuries, they're not like when they're low ankle sprains, they're not usually something that resurfaces during the game. These guys usually get kind of like injections on the sideline if their ankles are bugging them, and most of them can just play through it. So, Odell Beckham's a guy that I think you could probably start if you're desperate.
So the question I have is, so I currently have in my lineup, I have 3 running backs right now. I have Antonio Gibson, I have James Cook, who I'm starting regardless, especially with Josh Allen in the lineup. But I also have Javonte Williams. Now the question I have in a full PPR format, are you leaning Javonte Williams with Sean Payton already went out today, said like Jaleel McLaughlin's going to be involved. This is going to be a committee backfield. Or are you just throwing Odell Beckham Jr. in your lineup there?
You said it's full?
Full PPR.
Yeah, I'm taking Beckham there. I think there's like probably 45, 50 wide receivers that I would rather start over Breece Hall and Javonte, especially with wide receivers. Like throw them in your lineup and kind of see what happens. Like running backs, if they don't have a good role, you kind of know that like you don't want to start like running backs 30 to 36 over like the top 40 to 50 wide receivers, because even though you have like some guys in there like a Nico Collins or an Odell Beckham or an Elijah Moore or Gabe Davis or something like that, throwing those guys in your lineup is generally a smarter like dart throw than it is like a running or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Unless like that running back who's getting 8 or 9 opportunities is just as efficient as Jahmyr Gibbs. The real quick, by the way, like slight interject right now. The fact that this guy had 8 PPR points on 9 touches is insane. Like, and I'm sure, like, obviously, you know, everybody had their downsides. Like, oh, he wasn't a consistent runner at Alabama, this and that. Like, I get it, dude. But you watch that Thursday night game and you just see that explosive ability, the tackle breaking ability. I think he broke like 6 tackles on 9 touches. Like, the guy's just fucking good at football. And if people are worried, like, let's say you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the 3rd round and you're like, I don't know, man, Monty's going to be involved. Monty's going to be involved. Yes, Monty is going to be involved. But Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to get 9 touches every week if he's doing that with those touches.
Again, people who are worried about Jahmyr Gibbs, the Thursday night game always gives us somebody like this every year. Remember Cam Akers and Allen Robinson talk after last year? I mean, both those guys ended up being terrible for the most part, but every year there's a guy that everybody's like talking about after the Thursday night game because we're just so deprived of football that we're like can't stop talking about these players. Jahmyr Gibbs was a rookie running back. Yeah, he was a 12th overall pick, but he is going to be eased in, and that's just how rookies are usually treated in the NFL, especially for like an old school coach like Dan Campbell.
Yep, 100%.
All right, so we got some questions now. Let's go. Dr. Brian Harris says, have to start one for Kelsey this week. Henry or Conklin? I'm assuming that's Hunter Henry of the Patriots there, or Tyler Conklin on Monday night. I don't mind throwing out the Monday Night Miracle and just having Tyler Conklin as the guy there. When your other option is Hunter Henry, I'll just take the upside that Aaron Rodgers has like a nice coming out party and Conklin catches a touchdown and what could be a high scoring game.
And for what it's worth, I may just favor Conklin to Henry in that matchup, anyways.
Yeah, especially in tight end. I mean, tight end premium, I think it gets a little bit more difficult because I think Henry has a better chance of commanding more targets just because his offense is like, I think he has a more stabilized role. I think it's possible that Conklin is splitting a tight end core with like CJ Uzomah and like the other tight ends there.
The argument I will say is, so he did have the tight end one role last year when it comes to Tyler Conklin. The one thing I will say is on a baseline projection standpoint, like obviously, of course, Aaron Rodgers hasn't been, you know, the highest of volume of passers, but comparatively to what we could expect in New England, like we should see at least a sizable uptick with the Jets passing volume versus New England's. And even if Henry has, you know, second target in the read type of utility type of autonomy on that offense, I do think Conklin has the opportunity to still have 5 to 7 targets, maybe jump into the end zone and a tight end premium. That's all you're really hoping for, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much hoping for a touchdown out of either of these guys. And I think given that Conklin has Aaron Rodgers, it's probably more likely that he scores a touchdown than Hunter Henry, especially if the Bills are going to put up points on the other side of the ball, which maybe won't happen because the Jets defense is really good, but I pretty much trust the Bills to be able to put up points any given week. So Jared says, okay, cool, thanks. Now I got Deion Jackson versus Jamal Williams. This is, who do you got?
Give me Jamal pretty easily. I have Jamal pretty high this week, to be honest.
Really, you do? I see. Yeah. I have Jamal pretty low this week.
Because where do you have him?
I have him in the 30s.
Oh wow, we might have to do something with Jamal.
I dirt Jamal Williams a little bit. Why you'd have him high? Like I think it's a workload thing with Kendre Miller coming in injured, with Alvin Kamara suspended. I probably will move Jamal Williams up a little bit and over Deion Jackson now that Zach Moss is expected to play. But I will say, I wouldn't be shocked knowing that Zach Moss has been out for a number of weeks, knowing that Evan Hull is a rookie who was like a late round pick. I would not be totally shocked if we get like a 70% opportunity share game out of Deion Jackson against Jacksonville.
Yeah. No pun intended, but yeah.
Yeah.
All jokes aside, by the way. So I mentioned this before we recorded, but I think you were doing something so you didn't notice. I did raise Raheem Mostert quite significantly, and it's Raheem Mostert, so it's probably going to bite me in the fucking ass. But every time I just sit down, look at the matchup, look at the running back depth chart in Miami right now, knowing that prime example, Jahmyr Gibbs, knowing that rookies are not going to be leaned upon with that big workload right away, especially when Mostert and A-Chain, like Mostert, you can make the argument is a better running back at this point in his career. I have my RB13, man. Like
you have him all the way up there.
It's gonna bite me in the ass at some point, and I think it will. But at the same time, it's like 51 over under. Main running back that can have 15 to 20 opportunities and a touchdown or two in this game. Like I just can't not have him this high.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like I have Mostert still behind guys that I feel a little bit more confident in their workload with, like Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Dameon Pierce, Alexander Madison, guys like that. And I get the wanting to rate him high. I'm a little nervous because it's Raheem Mostert. That's the only reason I'm doing it. Because if he does miss, a number of the game because he's in the medical tent for a hamstring injury or something like that. It's such a stupid reason to lower somebody, but it's still Raheem Mostert. He still sketches me out.
Yeah, no, 100%. A quick note, by the way. So, what was I going to mention? It was the same thing with Amari Cooper when I did the wide receiver rankings video yesterday. So obviously I put that out. If you guys haven't already watched that, watch it after this live stream. But I basically talked about Amari Cooper. He's my wide receiver 18 this week. And I said, listen, like you can make the case that he's the wide receiver 13, the wide receiver 14 on this week. If you want to argue him as a high-end wide receiver too there, like I'm not going to argue with you. The reason why I have him at 18 is because Amari Cooper's Amari Cooper. Like I just flat out said that on the video. Amari Cooper is Amari Cooper. It's concerning, man. It's concerning.
Sorry, Jared actually added Judy to this decision as well. So if Jerry Judy plays and we don't have any kind of pitch count talk, are you playing Judy over Jamal Williams?
I mean,
I think I probably would. If he's totally fine, I think I would probably do it.
If you're the favorite, I would go with Jamal. If you need the upside and you're the underdog, I'd go with Judy.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair decision point there. Beanie also says Superflex PPR, need a flex. Very vast group of leagues that Beanie Weenie is playing, going from a standard to a Superflex PPR in one league. Need a flex with Pittman or Jordan Addison. I'm thinking Pittman to stack with Anthony Richardson. So the one thing I will say is that both of these game environments are going to be really conducive to points. But I am nervous about starting the number one receiver for a rookie quarterback in his first start against a Jacksonville defense that I actually think will be pretty good this year. So I'm probably going to go Addison there. As much as rookie Addison in his first start applies to him as well, he's kind of proven that he's a starter for his team. And I think he'll probably be out there for 70, 80, 90% of the routes.
And for what it's worth, so the big guy that people were curious in the wide receiver starts this video was actually Christian Kirk. So for the record, for full transparency, people were asking, like, why isn't Christian Kirk in your top 30? Why isn't Christian Kirk in your top 30? And we'll get to it in a second. But Sky Moore was at my 30. And I acknowledged that on the video. I said, hey, listen, like, we can play the process all we want. We can say highly utilized wide receiver, the most utilized wide receiver to a Patrick Mahomes offense. No Kelsey. We can project higher targets. But when Kelsey wasn't on the field, none of those guys could fucking get open. So the offense was just dog shit, to be quite honest. So I addressed that on the video. Like, obviously, we could project everything to, be a certain way. But if the player just can't go out there and earn targets, man, there's not much we can do.
Yeah, we acknowledge that, like, Sky Moore is not for the faint of heart. Like, you should not be playing Sky Moore if you're a safe player. But yeah, for what it's worth, I have Christian Kirk at 22, so I think you're fucking high as shit for not having
really, I have Addison over.
Yeah, dude, the Jacksonville Jaguars are implied like 25 points. The game's a 46-point over-under. Sharps are hammering the over right now. And the Colts have one of the weakest secondaries in the league.
I don't mind it. And for the record, if you don't count Sky Moore going into the Sunday slate, because obviously Thursday night game, he would have been inside of it. So don't worry.
I have him over like Drake London and Jahan Dotson.
You have
him
over
like
Evans and shit too, man. You have him over like Evans and shit?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
I might have to make you a Kirky bet.
Yeah, Kirk's got a good outlook this week for
sure. Kirk versus Godwin. Who you taking?
I have Godwin slightly higher.
Kirk versus I don't want to do Mike Evans because that's kind of a cop out.
I have him over Mike Williams if you want to do that.
I will take that right now.
Yeah, I'll give you the 54-point over under, but I'll shy away from the X Howard matchup if I can, knowing that that Kirk has such an easy matchup and it's Ridley's first game back too, so it's possible that Lawrence leads on him there. Jared says, and then finally Swift versus Brees versus Gibson versus Mostert, pick 2. So easily Mostert's the first one. And then I would go with Swift. I don't know if you have Gibson higher than this, than DeAndre Swift. For me, I'm sitting Brees for sure. Like, I'm keeping Brees on the bench. There's no need to play him in this decision. It would be between Gibson and Swift, and I personally would go with Swift.
Over Gibson?
Yeah, I would go with in half PPR too as well. That hurts Gibson more than it hurts Swift, in my opinion, just because Gibson's pretty much relegated to third down. You want to do it?
Gibson over Swift right now, easy. Are we forgetting that it's the new? Are we forgetting that it's Uncle Bill's New England Patriots front versus the Arizona Cardinals JV?
My friend, they are bad against the pass, or they are good against the pass, not against.
Sure, but I don't think I think that's gonna be a low-scoring game. I don't think the Eagles are gonna score a lot of points, and I think the Washington Commanders might score 35 against that Cardinals JV defense.
For what it's worth, that game has the lowest over/under on the slate at 38, and
yeah, because it's gonna be 35-7. Because it's gonna be 35-7.
Yeah, for sure. It could be because the Cardinals are so dog shit, but at the same time, a 38-point over/under with the Sharps hammering the under is bad for Washington also.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like that's also built in as a hedge against Sam Howell, knowing that the defense is probably going to shut down the Cardinals anyways. But I just give me Gibson, man. I think there's an
That's
opportunity
fair.
to have 20, 25 points this week.
I put my faith into the Eagles offense to be able to score points against anybody. I don't care who they
Fair,
play.
fair.
PPR have to pick 2:
You guys sit
Bateman,
Sharps.
Hall, Sharps.
If Walker's out, if Walker's playing, you got to sit Sharps.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, I would rather play Hall in a limited snap count potentially than play Charbonnet if Walker's playing, which he's not carrying an injury designation, so he's probably going to play. So I would go Bateman and Hall there. Farmer
Sounds
will.
good.
Wanye says, I need my next flex option, full PPR, so pick one. Rashad Bateman, Elijah Moore, Kyle Pitts, or Zach Charbonnet. For context, I'm starting Justin Fields, Bijan Robinson, David Montgomery's already been in his lineup, obviously. Drake London, DJ Moore, Mark Andrews, and Madison. So
Honestly, I'm just going Pitts.
you'd be starting 3 Falcons is pretty much the only thing that I would point to in this decision.
I mean, for what it's worth, if you want if you don't want to start 3 Falcons, then
Moore is the answer that I'm going with.
Over Bateman?
Yeah, I would go
with Odell banged up, with the rookie wide receiver beside him.
Texans are very good against the pass. They were one of the best in the league last year.
No, sure. I think he's going to be the one there, but yeah, I personally
that Browns-Bengals game has a ton of steam on a 48-point over-under of going over, too. So I also want piece to that game. I think the process play is going Elijah Moore, just given that you want pieces to that game. But he also has a little bit of an uncertain role. It's his first game there. We don't exactly
I like Bateman here.
Yeah, that's a tough decision, man. I don't envy this one for sure. I personally go Elijah Moore there. But I can see the argument for Pitts if you think the Panthers are just going to get trounced. And I also can see the argument for Bateman. But I personally would go Elijah Moore. The other thing, too, is that Rashad Bateman in Deepak's thread, he said that, the basis of his injury, he's only going to be like 85% at this time, like in terms of timeline perspective, and he won't be 100% until like week 3, week 4. So there's also some injury concerns to keep in mind with Bateman as well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. Again, I would go with him because I do think that the ceiling is high there. Because, I mean, this might be out on a limb. Obviously, some people were drafting Odell over him. Some people were drafting Zay Flowers over him. But I think at least for the intermediate part of the season, especially in 2 wide receiver sets, because as good as Zay Flowers might look, like he's probably solely an 11 personnel type of player, especially in the early portion of this year. He can play in 12. He can play in 2 wide receiver sets, but we know how coaches kind of react. They see a 5'9", 185-pound wide receiver. They don't want to throw him on the outside. So I do think that Bateman in 2 wide receiver sets is going to be the main wide receiver one. And I do think he's going to lead the team in terms of route participation. And for what it's worth, man, every time this guy's played, he's just been a hell of an efficient player, to be quite honest. Like we saw last year prior to him go down, he was very, very efficient. I mean, he was literally a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, and people are like, well, this can't stay up because the utilization is so bad. He's just so damn good at football that it doesn't even matter for him. So I think at one point he was averaging like 21 yards per catch. Like it was pretty insane.
Yeah, I will say though, like Zay Flowers is one of the rookie wide receivers that I could see start the season as the number 1 route participation guy, just because Bateman and Beckham are kind of banged up a little bit. And he did, like, for what it's worth, he wasn't a slot receiver in college. So even though he's small and projects to be a slot receiver, he actually wasn't one in college. So I
just
could
based
see
off
them
based off their personnel, though, it would kind of make sense.
Yeah, no, it makes some sense. I actually think, if Flowers is the prospect that I saw at Boston College, it actually makes sense to put Beckham in the slot because he's older.
Yeah. No, I would actually agree with that, to be honest. Just give him the easy routes, like, let him be the vet of the locker room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Farmer Will ask, what's the latest on Mark Andrews? I already had to sit Kelsey in my. So you have Andrews and Kelsey already. That's an interesting thing. Imagine having Andrews and Kelsey and having to start Jake Ferguson in week 1. How terrible of a situation is that?
Such a cock tease.
Yeah. Anyways, the latest on Mark Andrews is that he has a quad strain. Deepak says, Ravens Mark Andrews says TBD, lean towards playing. Moderate quad strain data says low performance dip, but a 15% increase re-aggravation risk. So he's questionable officially going into the game. He's probably going to play, probably going to get the majority of the routes. I wouldn't imagine he's going to be on any kind of pitch count, but I would definitely keep in mind Sunday morning, make sure to pay attention to the reports. It's possible that he's just going to be fine. I'm not overly concerned about Andrews. If you guys have Andrews, I would assume you're probably going to have Andrews for week 1, and worst case, just make that decision Sunday morning and go after Ferguson there.
Yep. Cheers, Dr. Harris. Who do I pick up at defense? I know some are better streamers and some are better season long-term options. Pittsburgh, Denver, Atlanta, or Jacksonville. Honestly, just give me the Denver Broncos. I think they're going to mollywop the Raiders in week 1.
Yeah, for what it's worth, when it comes to defenses and like who's a better season-long option, I honestly don't care. When it comes to defenses, unless you hit gold on like the 2017 Jaguars defense, or like, there was a couple of years when I played in defensive leagues. That was like the last time I had a defense. That's why they're the first reference of my mind. that you can play them against anybody. And maybe the Jets are that defense this year, or maybe the 49ers are that defense this year. But for the most part, I'm going to stream defenses unless I hit gold on like a couple good weeks in a row. Maybe the tiebreaker could be like who has a good week 2 matchup, because all of these defenses have really good matchups this week. I would steer clear of Pittsburgh because the 49ers can score points. But Denver, Atlanta, or Jacksonville, you really can't go wrong. You got a rookie quarterback for Atlanta and Jacksonville, and you have Jimmy Garoppolo for the Denver Broncos. I lean Denver as well because they're at home, Mile High against the Raiders. They could be a dumpster fire this year potentially.
Might have like 6 sacks in that game
as well.
Might have like 6 sacks in the game. Like let's contextualize for a second that the Raiders were sniped on Paris Johnson Jr. in the draft, end up going with an edge rusher after every single mock drafter or football analyst basically said like, yeah, this team needs an offensive lineman. Well, now we have a defensive front from Denver that might legitimately get 4, 5, 6 sacks in this game. And obviously on the back end, I mean, you're talking about freaking the best cornerback in the NFL with Patrick Surtain, in my opinion.
It's a hot take for what it's worth, but
really?
Yeah, Surtain is going to shadow Devontae Adams. So if he's not able to get a lot going, it's going to be a rough sledding for the Raiders. And the Broncos are quite good against the run as well. So if Jacobs and Adams aren't doing well, like that's the whole offense, man. Like Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow going to beat these guys? Probably not.
No. Start one in the flex, full PPR 10-man.
He has it down here. Which to start in the flex? Ryan, Sanders,
Miles
or
Sanders.
Dion? Is that Miles Sanders? I'm trying to think. What other Sanders would that be?
That has to be Miles Sanders. Who else it can be?
Yeah, you're going Miles Sanders there,
Easily.
Oscar. Easily, honestly. He's got the best workload of that group.
Yep. And RM, trust me, I took my own advice there. I had him in multiple fucking leagues in my lineup. If you think you're the only one hurt by this, there's multiple people hurt by this. And again, I talked about it in the wide receiver video. We can't get everything right, but I mean, when the process, like, I hate being like
I think the process was there. Like, you had a 54-point over-under. A guy, Travis Kelce, was out for that game. 99% of the time, I would have told you to start Sky Moore over Pacheco. Like, it just, I would have. And it's not like Pacheco had a monster game. Like, he literally had like 9 points or whatever in PPR.
Yeah,
so,
congrats,
points. He missed out on 9 points. But again, if you don't want to ask our advice and take what we say, then make your own decisions as well. You're more than welcome to take the information
at the end
that we tell you and then still kind of make your own decisions.
At the end of the day, we're going to try to tell you our reasoning, why we have it ranked a certain way, why we would do a certain thing, break it down the way we can. But at the end of the day, it's your guys' fucking lineup. If you feel uncomfortable making a play when everybody else is comfortable making it, don't make that play. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out for you, you're going to resent everybody who said to do it. But if it does work out for you, you sat them and it does bad, then you're going to be like, oh, I got ahead of the curve here. I'm the smart guy here. And then worst case scenario, if you did do that and then and he did go off, then you can just say, oh, you know what? Like, they did tell me to do this, but I didn't feel comfortable about it. It's okay.
Yeah, make your own mistakes, and you can take your own victory laps then as well. And you could come in here and say, "Hey, I told you, like I started Pacheco over Sky Moore, and I was right, obviously." So, Gator fan says, "I have a trade inquiry. Trade Gabe Davis and either Tank Bigsby, Roshan Johnson.
I'm doing this
for Michael Thomas and Raheem Mostert. So, what do you like on this side?"
I'm doing that. I want Michael Thomas, Raheem Mostert. Reason being is because I think it helps you so much in terms of early season utility. And those guys have an opportunity, I think, more than Gabe and more than either of those running backs, assuming health for their starters in front of them, to gain value. So I do think Michael Thomas has a clean projection going into week 1. Now, I don't know how long that'll last, and then Raheem Mostert, like we kind of said, he's my RB13 this week. He's a top 20 running back for Corey as well. That the utility there alone is going to be really nice. So if you need like a running back, especially to start for you this week, I would honestly do this deal.
Yeah, I think the key word is if you need a running back to start this week, because I would not do this if you have a very strong starting lineup already, and these guys are bench players for you. But I would do this if you have Breece Hall, you have Javonte Williams, you have Cooper Kupp, you have, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson, some of the guys that are out right now, Travis Kelce or something like that. So it all depends on your team needs. If this is a shallow league and you have a really good starting lineup, I definitely probably want the Gabe Davis, Tank Bigsby, and Roshan side. But if this is a deeper league and you need some guys into your lineup this week, then I think this is a pretty good move for you. So it really all depends where your team is at.
Well, that's the number one thing. Again, in deeper leagues, you're going to want to do this because you need that player to start in your lineup. If you're not in a deeper league, if you're in a shallow league and you have a ton of depth and Raheem Mostert would be your RB5, then there's no point in doing that, because at the end of the day, if Raheem Mostert's not entering your lineup from a production standpoint, you may as well go with the implied value that if anything happened to ETN, that Tank Bigsby would be a unanimous top 12 running back.
And I would also make the argument that Gabe Davis is the best player in this deal too. So I personally think he's the guy that you can throw into your. He's like discount Mike Williams. Like Mike Williams is the guy that you throw into your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 spot, and you just hope for a long touchdown, or you hope for a big play, or whatever the case is. Gabe Davis is kind of the same exact thing in a really good offense. I think he's going to be a guy that's a staple for most people's fantasy lineups as a flex option. So he's a guy that I think could actually crack your starting lineup most weeks, unlike some of the guys in this decision. If you have a good team already, Michael Thomas and Raheem Mostert probably aren't getting into your lineup.
And for what it's worth, if you do need somebody into your lineup, it definitely put in Roshan instead of Tank, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. We don't know what's going to happen in the Bears backfield is one that I'm actually quite excited to see what happens there.
We already got to Oscar, but I have Jamal Williams versus Mostert versus Gibson in my RB2. That's pretty easy for us.
It's not even close for us. We have Mostert like 2 tiers. Like in the running back rankings video, I think I had Mostert like 2 tiers above those guys. So he's way ahead of those guys for me this week.
Full PPR, Brian Robinson or DeAndre Swift. I would go with Brian Robinson, to be honest, but
I have Swift, especially full PPR, dude. Brian Robinson loses a lot of juice in full PPR, so I'll take Swift there easily.
Man, I just want access to the touchdowns in that game because I think the Cardinals are going to get mollywop, but like they're close enough where if you want to go Swift, especially considering that, I'm not going to make bets on both Gibson and Brian Robinson against Swift because that just seems like one of them is basically for sure to lose at that point. I don't mind that. They're relatively close for me. So if you want to do that, sure.
Yeah, I'm taking Swift there pretty comfortably.
32 versus 29 for me for the record. Actually,
okay,
Javante's
I have Swift
down
at 24 and I have Robinson at 31. So they're pretty in PPR.
For the record, though, Javante is going to drop for me because obviously the news.
Yeah, and I'm gonna probably ding down Brees a little bit too. Like here's another question: would you start both Commanders running backs over Brees and Javante?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Okay, is that the cutoff for you, or do you have anybody else above those guys? Like, would you start Jamal Williams over Brees and Javante?
Yes.
Yeah, you would.
I have Jamal at 25, dude.
Okay, yeah, you have Jamal way higher than me. So, would you start Khalil Herbert over Brees and Javante?
Yes.
Yeah.
Khalil Herbert at 31.
That's fair.
I'll tell you right now,
would you start Deion Jackson over those guys?
I have Brees at 33, Javante at 34.
Okay, I have Javante at 32 and Brees at 33. I barely have Jamal Williams ahead of them, but I do have Jamal Williams ahead of them.
Yeah, I have Jamal Williams a good amount ahead of you.
If you had both Jets running backs, are you starting Dalvin or Brees?
Brees still.
Okay, just curious on that one. What about if the Broncos running backs? Would you start Samaje or Javante?
It's Javante. There's going to be a lot that would need to happen for me to have Samaje Perine in my starting lineup, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to keep it real, bro. Like I want to enjoy my Sundays, and like putting Samaje Perine in there to rumble for 3 yards a pop. Like I just don't want to.
Hope he falls ass backwards into a touchdown somehow. Like that's the only way he hits, and his ceiling is like 14 points.
Well, basically in terms of Samaje, imagine you were a David Montgomery owner in that Lions versus Chiefs game. And like he got 13.3 points because he ended up falling face first into the end zone at the end of the game. But if he doesn't score that touchdown and you're looking at like 23 touches for like 71 yards, like that's just disgusting, man. And it's literally the Jamal Williams last year. Jamal Williams was good because he scored touchdowns. But if he didn't score touchdowns, people would have realized like, hey, fuck, man. Like this guy literally just has like 22 carries for fucking 70 yards every game.
Yeah, pretty much. Zach says, he also, okay, so this is the Mostert, Gibson, and Jamal Williams in my RB2. He said, I also have Terry at flex and Addison and Treylon Burks. I have to start 2 of the 6. Okay, so Mostert's your RB2, no questions asked. And then Terry and Addison are the 2 flexes that I would play. If you can only play one of those guys, I'm not sure if that's I think you can only play one. Would you start Terry or Addison?
Go risk averse, go Addison. I actually just moved that in my rankings.
Do you go risk averse with Addison?
I
view him as the riskier option.
I don't want to deal with the toe, man. I don't want to deal with the toe.
That's fair. I think that's a fair discussion. I actually think Addison is the riskier option.
He probably is, to be fair, but I'm talking about risky in terms of finishing the game. I don't really think Addison finishing the game is a risk.
No, I agree with you. I think he's probably a good bet to finish the game. But Terry McLaurin, the fact that he's going to play and he got in like practices and shit, I'm really not all that concerned for him, to be honest.
For the record, so in terms of my rankings right now, honestly, I'd probably Would you play Addison? How would you rank the three of Addison, McLaurin, and Deontay, bro? Because I had a Deontay,
I
Addison, and
literally have
McLaurin,
them
but
all 3 in a row right now. I have McLaurin at 28, Addison at 29, and Deontay at 30. That's the way I have them ranked.
I got to lower Deontay then.
But I will say Deontay is the safest of those 3. So if you needed, just a PPR, get me like 15 points type of play, then Deontay Johnson's probably your guy. I just don't think that the game will be very high scoring between them and the 49ers. And I think that Kenny Pickett will probably struggle a little bit. So you could be getting like a 13-point performance from the Steelers offense.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, like I did have Christian Kirk at 31 when I recorded yesterday's video.
Yeah, Kirk needs to be overall.
I rose him. 100%. I rose him. He's 28 for me. He's 28. Yeah. He went from 31 to 28.
I'm all the way up there.
That's fair. So you would take him over Dotson then?
Yeah, I would. Now that McLaurin's playing, yeah. If Dotson was alone there and McLaurin wasn't playing, I would take Dotson over him. But I am taking Kirk over Dotson this week.
Interesting, yeah. I think I'm still going to lean Dotson.
The Jags are implied like 25 points, and the Sharps have like 98% of the money on the over right now. Like I think that game could be a massive shootout.
For what it's worth, Christian Kirk always feels like a guy I have too low in my ranking, so I guess I'll just eat it again this week if I'm wrong. But I do have him at 28 for the record.
Yeah, I mean he's gonna stay in the every week wide receiver 2-3 range for me most of the time. Like even if you want to play like a riskier option over him, I think he should be a guy that you really consider as a flex option week over week.
Mostly in full PPR, obviously.
Yeah, in full PPR especially. Yeah, because he's going to be a guy that catches a lot of passes probably. Andrew says full point PPR, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, starting ETN and Javonte and Garrett Wilson and Ridley as my wide receivers. Was going to play London and Christian Watson as my flexes. Christian Watson's obviously out. But now should I go Elijah Moore, Judy, or Dylan?
The receivers.
Right. Okay. So
the receivers, because I think you want leverage in case you hear any more negative Javonte news.
Yeah, but you don't have any pivot options.
Right, because AJ plays before him, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think they play at 4 if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to look at that real quick. So
for the record, right now, as we're on stream right now, I have Javonte as my RB 34. He plays at 425, and I have AJ Dillon as my 40, and he plays at 425. So
he plays at 4 as well.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you hear any more negative news on Javonte, you just pivot to Dillon then. But yeah, you're definitely going London as your first flex for sure. And then I would go Judy as your second flex, assuming he plays. Do you have a pivot option though? Is my question. I guess Dillon could be your pivot option, hypothetically.
I mean, when does Elijah Moore play?
I think he plays at 1.
He plays at 1, doesn't he?
Yeah, he plays at 1.
Yeah, that is tricky.
I lean towards Judy playing, to be honest. I think Judy's going to end up playing.
For what it's worth, do you put... Nah, actually, no. I was going to say, do you put AJ Dillon in RB2, but that's already like sacrificing too many points. Never mind. Yeah. Honestly, I would just go with Judy in the flex, to be honest.
I would as well, but if you hear like pitch count stuff, then I would pivot to Moore.
Yeah, I would agree.
Flex JSN or Zay Flowers. I have Lamar. If you have Lamar, I would probably already go Zay over JSN to begin with. So I'm definitely going Zay in that situation.
Thoughts on what to do with
Sky Moore and Dynasty? I would sell him for a mid-second if you can get it.
I would sell him for a second, but the problem is like it would be seldom for somebody to offer a second at this point. So if you're getting offers of like a third or worse, you may as well just hold them and see if he can capitalize on the role. Like the role I'm referring to was 65% route participation, which is not good at all, but shit happens in week 1, man. Like honestly,
Thursday night football in general, shit happens on, to be honest, let alone week 1 Thursday night. Remember, like how many bad Thursday night performances have we seen? Dude, Gabe Davis looked like a superstar after week 1 last year on Thursday night football.
Well, there was someone in particular that people were really, really questioning.
Akers and Allen Robinson were the two guys that came out of it.
2 years ago, there was someone in particular. Was 2 years ago Chiefs Texans?
No, that would have been 3. It would have been Buccaneers Cowboys.
Buccaneers Cowboys, right? We were questioning what's his face?
Godwin.
It was one of your receivers. Like it was Mike Evans, right?
It was all of them because Antonio Brown had the big game.
Yeah,
it was Evans and Godwin that everybody was.
Antonio Gibson. Antonio Brown toasted Anthony Brown all game. I remember that. That was fucking horrendous. And like Trayvon Diggs kind of like locked up Mike Evans because all the volume was going to Antonio Brown. So I remember for like a week I had to hear like, is Mike Evans on the downswing? Like he just got he just got absolutely just shadowed by Trayvon Diggs all game and shut down. And it's like, oh, well, maybe Trayvon Diggs is just fucking good because he ended up being a fucking stud at the end of the year. Like,
yeah. Dylan Flex J. Oh yeah, we already answered that. Kirk or Pittman at wide receiver in full PPR. That's easily Christian Kirk for me, especially in full PPR.
Kirk.
James Cook, Deontay, JSN, or Addison at flex. I personally go Addison in this decision, but I think Deontay is probably the slightly safer play. If you're like projected to be like an even matchup or like a an underdog or a favorite or whatever, I would probably go Deontay. But if you need the ceiling, I mean, I don't want to discount James Cook here as well because he could have a score a touchdown or whatever. Where do you lean on James Cook between those two receivers?
I just want to go Addison.
Yeah, you want to go with the receivers over. It's not even close for James Cook for those guys.
Well, it'd be closer, but the problem is I do think that the Jets front seven is going to be fucking humming today or on Monday.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're probably going to be in a good spot there. Also, full PPR, Deontay Johnson or JSN Deontay pretty easily.
Yeah.
That one's like that'd be a pretty frivolous play. If you're going to go JSN over a proven like PPR guy this early on, I probably wouldn't do that.
Brandon says Addison or Charbonnet, leading Addison, but need to feel better about it. Wasn't planning on starting either, but forced with no Watson. I'd go with Jordan Addison here.
Yeah, the only way you're playing Charbonnet there is if Walker's out, which he's not going to be. So,
Champagne says Ravens or Cowboys defense. Should I keep one D all year or change week to week? I would go with the Ravens defense this week because they are at home, 10-point favorites in a low implied total game. I think the over-under is like 43.5 or 44.5 in that game, something very, very low. And it's a rookie quarterback. Like I already talked about the fact that I think the Texans could surprise and they could cover in that game. But at the same time, it's like baseline projection. You got to go with that Ravens defense.
Yeah, I will say that the Cowboys could be the one of the defenses that you could legitimately hold all season. Because I don't want to boost Danny's ego up too much, but like I think the Cowboys defense might be the best in the league, or at least one of the best 3 or 4 defenses in the league. So. And you have the Giants, Daniel Jones, turnover-prone quarterback. The Jets next week at home. Aaron Rodgers might be getting his sea legs under him. Arizona in week 3. New England in week 4. So, I mean, you do have a pretty good opening schedule for the Cowboys, and they are just the way better defense of the Ravens versus Cowboys. So, I mean, the Ravens are a better projection this week because they play the Texans. But I will say, I think I would go with the Cowboys defense, just knowing that they are the better defense and they could actually carry you for a couple months. Generally speaking, I like to go, change defenses week over week. But if you have the Cowboys defense, I mean, I'm imagining you probably spent a pretty high pick on them. Right? You probably didn't get them in the last round of your draft.
I mean, if you spent on more than a last round opportunity cost on a defense, then you should start them, in my opinion. So I don't mind that. Start one full PPR, Nico Collins or Michael Pittman. CJ Stroud's wide receiver 1 versus AR's wide receiver 1. As much as I love Nico Collins, you got to go with Michael Pittman in week 1. Until I see like what this Texans offense looks like. Obviously, I have no concerns that Nico Collins is going to be the number 1 on the Texans, in my opinion. But Michael Pittman's clearly the number 1 on the Colts.
Right.
And Michael Pittman, for what it's worth, like I understand you want to make the argument like, oh, Anthony Richardson, he's not going to be as well adept as a passer in week 1 compared to like what CJ Stroud will be. And I get that. But at the same time, it's like, I know Michael Pittman right now is a good football player. I have to project Nico Collins to be a good football player. I think he's a good football player, but there's a lot more question marks there. Whereas Michael Pittman, he's good. He's good. That's all I have to say, really.
For what it's worth, on Champagne's question, he says Cowboys D is on the waivers. I'd pick him up and hold him for a couple weeks just to see, because they could be a legitimate difference maker at defense this year. Graham says Tua or Deshaun Watson. Full PPR, who's catching more passes here. And he says, and Rodgers versus Russ half point. So I would go Tua over Deshaun Watson. As much as I love Deshaun Watson long-term, and I think he's going to be the better option than Tua, the over-under against the Chargers is just too juicy for me not to get pieces of that game.
So for reference right now, my quarterback rankings are kind of out there this week. I'm not going to lie. So I have Josh Allen at 2. Obviously, Mahomes is 1. Lamar Jackson is my quarterback 3. Justin Herbert at 4, Jalen Hurts at 5, Fields at 6, Trevor Lawrence at 7, Joe Burrow at 8, Tua at 9, and then Dak at 10.
Yeah, that's a little out there. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I mean, leaning with quarterbacks, I generally just lean towards game environments when it's a close decision. So that's why I go. For what it's worth, Watson in the Bengals game is going to be a high scoring game as well. But I do like the Tua side there, and then Rodgers versus Russ. This one's interesting. Who do you have a lean here? Because Russ has the Raiders defense, probably going to be a pretty easy matchup for him. Rodgers, it's his first game with the Jets. They're playing against the Bills on Monday night. I think I lean Rodgers just because I trust him more, but Russ is probably at the better matchup.
I have Russ at 16 and Aaron Rodgers at 18. So they're pretty indifferent in my rankings, but I do have Russ a couple spots higher.
Yeah. I also I mean, this is a stupid reason to start a player, but I do love having a guy going on Monday Night Football as a last chance. You know,
and for what it's worth, the last time we saw Aaron Rodgers, he wasn't a complete train wreck. Versus the last time we saw Russ, he was a complete train wreck. So
that's that. Yeah, it's week one, man. Shit happens. That's weird in week one, which is why I tend to lean with the guy that I trust more. With Aaron Rodgers there.
And for what it's worth, real quick, I'm not sure. Have you seen any of Hard Knocks, bro?
Yeah, I've watched the whole thing.
So I just finished the first episode yesterday. I'm gonna try to watch it before Sunday. But the main thing I took away from that first episode is they treat the guy like he's Jesus walking on water anytime he's around someone in the building. Like
the first episode is very like dick sucky about Aaron.
The glazing is insane.
It's a little less like that as we go along, but I mean, Robert Saleh, anytime he opens his mouth, or like Jeff Albrecht, the defensive coordinator, like that guy's our quarterback. He's ours. We have him. And I'm like, hey, dude, there's plenty of other great quarterbacks in your conference. Chill out.
It was so funny because he made like this one throw, like he like dotted like the back pylon or whatever. And then Jeff Olbricht's like talking to his defense. He's like, there may be one player on the entire planet that can make that throw, and he's wearing green.
Yeah. Also, Marvin Harrison has a 39-yard touchdown and a 71-yard touchdown in the first 2 minutes of this game.
No shot.
I mean, for what it's worth, they're playing Youngstown State, so I wouldn't read too much into that. But I did just see on my score app that he has like 2 bomb touchdowns, which is hilarious. But
sounds good.
What else we got here?
Let's bang these out.
Yeah, the Kelsey Andrews league I mentioned earlier is 1 point tight end premium. That's why I have both. Yeah, I mean, in a 2 PPR for tight ends, you're going to be pretty strong there,
dude. Real quick, bro. Guys. So in even worse, bro, we mentioned the fact that in a normal tight end, scoring setting, that imagine having to fucking see Andrews and Kelsey on your bench and starting Jake Ferguson. Now imagine that in a full point tight end premium, dude. That's the disgusting. Worst.
Yeah, that's actually sickening, to be honest.
Oh man.
So Addison or James Cook PPR flex. Beanie Weenie says I would go Jordan Addison there, but James Cook is probably the safer projection. I will say. I have Chubb and Pierce, already have Diggs and deep at receiver. Start 3 flex options, and my bench running backs are Johnson. So this is back to the question he asked about Gabe Davis and Roschon or whatever. So Chubb and Pierce, you're already locked down at running back. You already have Diggs, you're deep at receiver. I probably would just hold Gabe Davis and then the Bigsby / Roschon side. If you don't need Raheem Mostert and Michael Thomas, then I probably don't make that trade there, Gator fan.
Yeah, I agree.
What happened to Javonte? What do you mean? Andrew tore his ACL last year. Ferguson,
hey,
what's up?
To be fair, he probably, because we mentioned that there was like news like working against Javonte, so that's probably what he was curious about. So if that's what you were referring to, so basically this morning, Sean Payton was asked about, just exactly how involved Javonte Williams would be, and he basically said he's like, it's week 1, we don't want to like put too much on his plate, like expect it to be a full committee, expect obviously Samaje and obviously Jaleel McLaughlin to get some work in this game, so. There is concerns. Like the reason why we're concerned is mostly because he name dropped Jaleel McLaughlin. If he had just said, Samaje Perine would get work, we already expected that coming in. But if McLaughlin's going to work into the equation and you're looking at a potentially, 33.3, 33.3, 33.3 split, I don't want to touch that.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page there as well. Dulcich or Ferguson, my flex is Ramondre. So I don't trust the Dulcich snap share yet to put him in my lineup. So I would just go with Jake Ferguson and hope for the best. Kind of hope he catches a touchdown or hope the Cowboys Giants game is really high scoring or something like that. So that I personally would go with Ferguson over Dulcich this week.
Real quick, so interesting note. Obviously, in week 1, if you do have Brees, like tread lightly, tread water. But everything we've been saying, man, like Rich Samini actually tweeted out. Today is September 9th. So he tweeted this out at 11:04. So 2 hours ago. He said, interesting nugget from Robert Saleh recalling Dalvin Cook's free agent visit. They gave Cook the worst case scenario with regard to possible playing time, according to Saleh. And apparently Saleh literally said, he's like, why would he even want to be here? So what that tells me is like, yeah, they paid him.
Everybody knows Dalvin's washed is what that tells me. Every NFL team knows.
basically, right? People are like, well, the contract, he's going to work into a 50-50 split. It's like, well, the coach is literally saying he was brought in because they had extra money to dangle because fucking Rodgers restructured. And they probably just did it to appease their Hall of Fame quarterback who saw this guy in his division, probably developed a good relationship with Dalvin Cook, said, hey, listen, we need a backup running back, and brought him in.
Yeah, he probably was like, Michael Carter isn't that good. Zonovan Knight got cut. I believe he's on the Lions now. And, Izzy Abanikanda had like an injury in the preseason as well. So maybe he was just worried about that. Also, I think this is a big development because this just caused a shift in my rankings because Zach Moss was just downgraded to doubtful. So for me, I would start Deion Jackson over the ACL bros now. With Zach Moss gone, it's a high scoring potential game. I'm starting Deion Jackson over Breece Hall.
Go for it. I can't do it.
It's con to me. It's really safe. I understand it. But I think that unless you need a huge ceiling performance, I'm probably going to go with Deion Jackson.
Hey, Bush, I understand it. It's pretty strong reasoning. However, can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Yeah, no, I understand it. I understand. I think that we're getting like a 30 to 50% snap share from Breece Hall. And honestly, I think Deion Jackson might be a 70% opportunity share guy. Even if he doesn't have a big game, that's a good opportunity for a touchdown. He might catch some passes. There was that game last year with Matt Ryan. Didn't he have like 10 targets one game or something like that?
Not against the Vikings, or am I tripping? Because
he had a game where he had like a bunch of targets, and to me, I'm going to lean towards the workload with Deion Jackson, knowing that if Moss was playing, I would still start Breece. But now that Moss is downgraded to doubtful, I'm probably going to steer away from Breece Hall Monday night.
Fair enough.
But I do like the fact. I just want to wait and see with him. I think we haven't answered this yet.
Oh, my fault. Do I trade Taylor? I have Mixon, Dobbins, Pierce, Damian Harris. I have a top 3 team in the league. Well,
Absolutely
well, that's what I was going to ask.
Also, in Dynasty, I wouldn't trade Jonathan Taylor just because he's out for the first 4 games. We're thinking long term here. He's like a 2 to 3 year window elite running back. And because you have Mixon, Dobbins, Pierce, and Damian Harris, you're totally fine to just wait for him to come back. So I personally would definitely not trade Jonathan Taylor unless you're given some magical offer that I highly doubt anybody's going to trade for a guy who's out for the first 4 games. I'm holding Jonathan Taylor, especially as a contender.
I'd agree. Javonte or Addison full PPR? Give me Addison there pretty easily there, Cody. I'm assuming you agree. Cody, Cowboys he's on the waiver wire. I never drafted defense, so I dropped Pirine for the Cowboys defense. He's probably my worst player. If he's your worst player on your bench, and given their bench, I would agree he is your worst player.
Do you already have a defense? Like he said, Ravens D. Do you already own the Ravens?
I'm assuming defense? He's choosing which one to pick up off of waivers.
Okay, yeah. If you're choosing which one, he said I never draft a defense, so he probably didn't draft one. I would say drop Pirine for your for the Cowboys D then.
Yeah, makes sense. What'd you send me? I'm not giving you JSN. Come on now.
Yeah, I sent you an offer.
Okay.
What was the offer I sent you again? QJ and a 2 for JSN?
No, I just saw JSN in a 2, and I didn't even read what was on the other side because I just declined.
Oh, I offered you Debo, Godwin, and a 3rd for JSN and a 2 because I'm not competing and I need young players.
I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't do that if the 2 was on the other side.
That's wild. I mean, you got people, dude. That's what I hate about JSN in Dynasty. It's impossible to get, man. Everybody's
the market is
excited about JSN.
Well, the market's just so high, man. Like I gotta hold them.
I realize that, but to me, I think it's a little outrageous that we're crowning this guy as the next Garrett Wilson without having him him playing a game yet. I get it, he was a great prospect and he was really good in college and that kind of thing. But there's still a world where JSN is not Justin Jefferson or Garrett Wilson. I think people fail to realize that.
Respectable.
Last year, your guys' Dynasty Manifesto had 2023 rookie prospects to watch in college. Are you going to do that again this year? Would love some more prospect. So I'm glad he brought this up. So Wanye's asking, I think I put out a database on our Patreon last year called 2023 prospects to watch or something like that. And I'm definitely going to do that again this year. So maybe this weekend or next weekend or something when, the dust settles a little bit of the NFL season starting, I think I'll do a watch these prospects for the 2024 rookie drafts and kind of maybe a stock watch every 3 weeks or so, maybe go in and update what I'm seeing from those players. So, and for what it's worth too, the Dynasty Rankings Manifesto will be returning this year as well. The redraft guide and all that stuff was such a big success. I'm glad you guys really enjoyed that. So we're going to do the same thing when it comes to Dynasty drafts. And also, can't announce it yet, but we might have a really, really cool announcement for our Listener League startup this coming off season. And we're going to obviously do another one because we're degenerates.
Stay buckled then because we have some big shit we're fucking planning, like FSC to the fucking moon. And
also too, behind the scenes, we are getting some tools and stuff potentially added this offseason to the actual site. So, I mean, obviously, you guys listening to this are site subscribers. I'm not going to spoil everything. I don't know what Mason wants to tell people, but there's going to be some cool tools that that you guys are going to be able to use. Right now, our site is still pretty bare bones. It's, you know, rankings and articles and stuff like that. That is not the long-term plan. It ain't going to stay this way.
No. Dion or
Um,
DeAndre Swift? DeAndre.
Yeah, I'm still going. So for what it's worth, I moved Deion Jackson from running back 34 just ahead of Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, and Jamal Williams. That's the only change I made. So he's not like skyrocketing up my rankings. He's just up a little bit from where he was.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It would be pretty gross to sit both Andrews and Kelsey but without them, I'm projected to win by 70 points. Jesus, Farmer Will
cook that guy.
Dominant team here.
Flexes Mondre, he's questionable if he does play. If he doesn't play, should I start Flowers, Mims, Q, Jared, drop any of them for Deion Jackson? I would honestly just throw Flowers in.
Yeah, I think he's going to be just fine, so I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, I would start Flowers as well.
I have Debo in full PPR as my wide receiver 1, 18-team league. Don't ask. Jesus. Debo makes me nervous. Who are some upgrades to trade? Upgrade trade targets? Like, I mean, like how much more will it cost to go from Debo to Calvin Ridley is the question mark.
Yeah, that would be the big question I would have as well.
And make sure you do that before week 1.
In most redraft leagues.
And make sure you do that today because after week 1, you may not have an opportunity to trade for Calvin Ridley. I'm just gonna say that right.
I wouldn't be shocked if Calvin Ridley is one of the biggest trade targets after week 1. Just because it's his first game back, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't have the best game in the world.
I think it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to go like that or the guy's going to have 10 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, that's definitely possible for sure. Yeah, I would say, what does it take for you to go from Debo? The other person I would mention as well as T. Higgins, because T. Higgins has some uncertainty because of the contract right now, and that shouldn't affect his outlook, but maybe it does a little bit. So I would say Debo to T. Higgins or Debo to Ridley. I'd be willing to give up a decent piece off my bench if this is redraft and a second round pick if this is dynasty as well. Yes, I have Ravens D. Oh, so he already has the Ravens D on his team. So I would just drop the Ravens defense, to be honest, and go with the Cowboys.
Yep.
Just because you're getting a good month out of them and they could be a little bit more of a high ceiling season long play. Andrew says 12 team, half PPR, starting Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, and Addison at wide receiver. Need one flex with Christian Watson out. Do I start Jaden Reed, Hollywood Brown, or Quentin Johnson? So
Hollywood plays Hollywood.
Hollywood is also dealing with something, which is not ideal. So your team's kind of in shambles right now, but I would say Hollywood's definitely the play if assuming he plays.
Yep.
All right. So we've gotten to the end of the questions list here. We will answer like any more that you guys have. Feel free to drop them below, but I am actually going, my girlfriend's taking me to a Michelin star restaurant for my birthday. Since she was in Italy for my birthday last week. So she's taking me to a nice little dinner tonight. So I got to head out to old T-Dot and go to that after we're done with this. So I'm actually going to miss the Texas-Alabama game tonight, which is going to suck, but I'll rewatch the highlights. If we lose, it's whatever anyway. So
dude, you know I'll be spamming your phone saying, "Oh my God, viewers, what are you doing?"
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's probably what's going to end up happening. But yeah, any other questions, feel free to leave them here at the end. But for the most part, we'll probably just sign off here. Give or take, every week we want to keep this to about an hour. We don't want to be going here for like 2-3 hours talking about everyone's questions. So if we got all your questions answered again, feel free to tune in again next week. We're going to be doing this every single week around noon Eastern on Saturdays. And then, of course, we will be live before the games on Sunday as well if you want to get some updates and that kind of thing. The only problem is it's not going to be private, so there's going to be a lot of people in there, so it might be tougher to get your questions answered. So, Andrew, this will be the last question we answer here. He says, Dak or
real quick, he says DJ being turnover prone. When did we say that
I did. I said when the Cowboys defense, I'm like, Daniel Jones can be turnover prone. I would say maybe he's not turnover prone as much anymore, but the Cowboys defense are very good at generating turnovers, so they might still generate them anyway.
Yep. Happy belated. That's to you. Dak or Deshaun, 6-point passing touchdown. I would go with Dak in a 6-point, especially knowing that Deshaun, it's week 1. I kind of want to just see him do it. Dak Prescott, 25 implied points on that Sunday night football game. Road favorites. Like, I just want Dak here.
I'll take Watson. I got him one spot higher. So the Bengals, what it's worth, the Bengals and Browns game has a higher over-under.
No, I agree. The higher over-under. I'm talking about just strictly the implied points.
Yeah, the implied total's higher for the Browns or for the Cowboys there. But I personally would go with Deshaun.
For what it's worth, I even said on the start set, I want access to this game because I think it could be like a 30-27 type of nail biter. Like maybe Bengals win on a walk-off field goal. But I think Deshaun's going to do good. I just like the projection for Dak in week 1 going against the Giants more.
Yeah,
a
for
team
what
that
it's worth,
he's
the
literally
Sharps are
dominated.
hammering the Browns right now against the
Yeah.
bank, like against the spread. They're hammering the Browns right now.
Yeah,
So
I like it.
in Cleveland, and Cincinnati typically struggles with Cleveland and that kind of thing. It also could be a Nick Chubb game, which is very possible too. So
For what it's worth,
yeah,
for what it's worth, last year at this time, the Bengals lost in week 1 to an underdog AFC North opponent, if you remember.
yeah, the Steelers beat them, and then the Cooper Rush Cowboys beat them in week 2, and they started the season 0-2, which is pretty crazy.
That was
For
funny.
them to make the AFC Championship after that is pretty wild. But anyways, appreciate you guys for joining us again. Stay tuned for all the stuff that we got going on. We will be updating our weekly rankings, which of course you guys as site subscribers have access to. I'm going to update mine probably when I get back tonight, or if not early tomorrow morning, with all the recent
I'll
news
be
and that
touching
kind of
them
stuff.
throughout the day.
Yeah, and we'll also update the spreads and where the sharps are betting and all that good stuff as well. So definitely appreciate you guys for joining us again. Stay tuned for next week as well. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.